Imagine standing before a towering stone fortress, its gray walls stretching high into the sky, banners fluttering in the wind. From the outside, it is magnificent, a picture of strength and majesty. You might think life inside would match its imposing beauty. Surely the halls would be warm, the food plentiful, the beds soft, and the days peaceful. Yet the reality for those who lived in castles was far from the romantic image painted in films and storybooks. Step through the heavy wooden doors and you will find yourself in a world that was drafty, damp, smoky, and often surprisingly uncomfortable. The first thing you notice when entering is the temperature. No matter what season it is outside, the air inside a medieval castle seems perpetually cold. The thick stone walls that made these fortresses so durable also trapped in the chill of winter and refused to warm under the summer sun. There were fireplaces, yes, but these were massive open hearths that radiated heat unevenly. Stand directly in front of the fire, and you might feel the skin on your face tingle with warmth, but your back will still be icy. Move even a few steps away, and the heat fades into a lingering cold that seeps into your bones. In winter, this was especially harsh. Servants and nobles alike wore layers upon layers of wool, fur, and linen, yet fingers still went numb and breath formed misty clouds in the great hall. Lighting was another constant struggle. Today, we imagine brightly lit corridors and flickering romantic candlelight, but castle interiors were dim and shadow-filled. Windows, when they existed at all, were narrow slits cut into the walls, more useful for shooting arrows than letting in sunshine. Glass was a rare luxury, so openings were often covered with oiled cloth or wooden shutters, neither of which let in much light. After sunset, torches and candles were the only illumination, casting a wavering golden glow that could not chase away the darkness lurking in corners and high rafters. Smoke from these flames hung in the air, filling your nose and clinging to your hair and clothes. The smell inside a castle was a mixture of life and labor. In the kitchens, great cauldrons of stew bubbled over open fires, the scent of boiling meat and herbs mingling with the tang of smoke, but other odors were less pleasant. Out. Without modern plumbing, waste had to be carried away or dumped down latrine chutes. And even the best-kept castle had a faint underlying smell of human habitation. Wet wool damp rushes on the floor, and the scent of animals from the stables or hunting dogs roaming the halls added to the mix. The air was heavy, and the lack of fresh ventilation in the winter months only made it thicker. The floors themselves were not the polished wood or stone you might picture. They were often strewn with rushes, reeds, or straw to soak up spills and waste, and these coverings were not changed frequently. Over time, food scraps, dirt, and insects found their way into them, creating a habitat for fleas and other pests. Even noble households lived with an unspoken acceptance of vermin. Mice scurried along the edges of the hallways, and spiders built webs in the high corners of the chambers. In summer, flies gathered around the kitchens and larders, drawn by the smell of meat and cheese. Beds were not the grand, feathery clouds of comfort you might imagine. A lord and lady might have a large wooden bedstead, with a mattress stuffed with straw, down, or wool, covered with heavy blankets. These offered some comfort, but mattresses could grow lumpy and damp, and sheets were not changed as often as they are today. Servants and guards slept on pallets or simple straw mats, sometimes directly on the floor, wrapped in cloaks for warmth. In the dead of winter, it was not unusual to wake with frost on the inside of the windows and feel the icy bite of the air before even stepping out of bed. Daily life inside a castle was filled with noise. The great hall echoed with the clang of cups, the chatter of servants, and the calls of guards. In the courtyards, the sound of blacksmiths hammering iron, horses neighing, and the clatter of wagons never stopped. Even at night, the quiet was not complete. Guards patrolled the walls, dogs barked at the slightest movement outside, and the wind moaned through arrow slits. The idea of peaceful silence was almost non-existent. Food was another area where the reality often clashed with modern expectations. While feasts could be elaborate and impressive, the everyday diet was far plainer. Bread, porridge, salted meat, and preserved fish formed the bulk of meals. Vegetables and fruit were seasonal and not always abundant. And without refrigeration, fresh meat had to be eaten quickly or preserved heavily with salt. Spices were prized but expensive, so most meals were simple and repetitive. The smoky flavor of the kitchen fires was present in almost everything you ate. Water was not always safe to drink, even within castle walls, as wells could become contaminated. Ale and small beer were common daily beverages for both adults and children, being safer than water and providing extra calories. While this was normal for the time, constant consumption of weak alcohol gave a haze to daily life that modern people might find strange. While castles were designed for defense, their architecture came with compromises in comfort. The narrow spiral staircases were difficult to climb, especially in the heavy clothing of the time. The thick doors were cumbersome, and in winter they let in a blast of cold air each time they opened. Drafts slipped in through cracks in the walls and gaps in the shutters. In wet weather, moisture seeped into the stone, making the air damp and the floors slippery. The labor needed to keep a castle functioning was immense. Servants hauled water, cleaned hearths, and carried food up and down long corridors. Heating an entire structure was impossible, so warmth was concentrated in key rooms, leaving the rest of the castle frigid. Washing clothing and bedding was a major chore, involving hauling water from the well, heating it in cauldrons, and scrubbing by hand. Bathing was infrequent for most people, both because of the effort required and the limited access to hot water. Even the highest-ranking residents were not immune to discomfort. A nobleman might wear fine clothes lined with fur, but these were heavy and cumbersome. Armor, when required, added weight and strain to the body. The lady of the castle might oversee the running of the household, but her own chambers were still subject to drafts and temperature changes. Privacy was rare, with servants constantly in attendance and thin walls allowing sound to carry. The romanticized vision of castle life often overlooks the constant maintenance and work required to keep such a place livable. Stone walls had to be repaired, roofs patched and wood replaced. Fires needed tending from dawn until nightfall. In times of siege, the discomfort intensified, as residents were confined indoors for weeks or months, rationing food, and dealing with the smells and sickness that spread in such close quarters. Despite all this, castles were the height of security and status for their time. To live in one was to be protected from raiders and enemy armies. The discomforts were accepted as the cost of safety and power. The same stone walls that trapped the cold also kept out arrows and fire. The narrow staircases that were tiring to climb could slow down an invading soldier. When you walk through the halls of a restored castle today, the rooms may seem quaint, the tapestries bright, and the furniture inviting. But if you strip away the modern lighting, the hidden heating systems, and the fresh-smelling air, you begin to sense the real experience of medieval castle life. You feel the weight of the cold in the stones, hear the echo of footsteps in the vast halls, and smell the mingling of smoke, food, and humanity. Living in a castle was not about luxury or leisure. It was about survival, defense, and status. It was about enduring the cold winters, the dim light, the damp air, and the constant presence of others. It was about making a home inside a fortress, accepting that comfort was always secondary to safety. So while the sight of a castle rising above the landscape may stir visions of grandeur and romance, remember that those who lived within its walls did not experience the fairy tale life we often imagine. You lived in a place where stone kept you safe, but also kept you cold, where feasts were rare, and work was constant, and where every day was shaped by the unyielding nature of the fortress itself. In truth, castles were marvels of their time, but they were never the warm and comfortable havens that stories suggest. So now you know that behind those towering stone walls and majestic gates, life in a medieval castle was far from a fairy tale. The cold seeped into your bones. The air carried the heavy scent of smoke and damp rushes, and the flicker of torchlight left shadows dancing in the corners. These fortresses were built for defense, not for comfort, and every luxury came with its own cost. Even the nobility wrapped themselves in layers just to keep warm and ate meals that were often more practical than indulgent. If you were expecting soft beds, bright rooms, and cozy fires in every chamber, the reality would have been a shock. Life inside was noisy, crowded, and filled with the constant labor needed to keep the place running. Yet, despite all this, people accepted the hardships because those cold stone walls offered safety that could mean the difference between life and death. So the next time you see a castle standing proud against the skyline, remember that its beauty hides a harsher truth. It was not built to pamper, but to protect. And those who lived there traded comfort for security every single day.